I grew up in the 80s, so movies from that time are some of my most memorable. Um, some of the some of my favorites worth mentioning are Star Wars, the Halloween movies, and Footloose. Um, Star Wars has been a huge hit since the late 70s and continued on through the 80s, even the 90s, and new episodes have been made and released even today. Um, Likewise, the Halloween movies and Footloose hit the box office again in the 2000s. All three of these films left me wondering what inspiration um, the producers had for creating these movies. So I did some research and I found some pretty cool information. So let's begin by going back to a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Filmmaker George Lucas was inspired by real-life people and events from our history to create his million-dollar science fiction movie. According to History.com, the making of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Lucas was asked during a 1981 story conference if Emperor Palpatine from Return of Jedi was a Jedi. And Lucas responded saying, no, he was a politician, and his name was Richard Nixon. So that's where George Lucas got the idea for the Emperor Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. He was comparing him to Richard Nixon. Lucas thought that Nixon was an evil man pretending to be nice, just like the character of Palpatine. And then also, the Vietnam War was an event that inspired George Lucas, because during the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon was running for president for a second term. So that was another thing that inspired him. Over the lifetime of Star Wars, the Lucasfilm has licensed over $20 billion worth of goods. The outrageous success of George Lucas's films creation led to Disney purchasing Lucasfilm in 2012 for $4.05 billion in cash and Disney stocks, according to AMA.org. So now let's go a bit further into the future to Haddonville, Illinois. This is the hometown of serial killer Michael Myers. John Carpenter directed the movie Halloween, and according to mentalfloss.com and telegraph.co/UK, he had originally planned to call these movies The Babysitter Murders, but after some suggestions of naming it based on a specific holiday, Carpenter changed the name to Halloween. It only took 10 days to write the original script and 20 days to shoot the film, and they only had a small budget of $300,000. The main theme music that I'm sure we all know it was inspired by Carpenter's father, who was a musical professor. He taught Carpenter how to play music beginning on bongos. So Carpenter sat down one day and he was just messing around on the piano, and he was thinking of the tune to bongos, and that's how that well-known theme song came from. That's where it came from. Some of the characters that inspired Carpenter was a British producer that had put out one of Carpenter's previous movies. That's who inspired the character of Michael Myers. He wanted the character to have just a pale, plain face that reminded him of the director that had, or the distributor that had put out his previous film. So that's where he had the idea of that. And the character of Michael Myers, the mask, really there was no preconceived notion of how they were going to do this, but since they had such a small budget, one of his production designers ran to a toy store close by and purchased a mask for under $2. And the mask was actually a Captain Kirk plain white mask that, from Star Trek. It was stretched out so it resembled him. and Carpenter loved it because he said it gave that eerie blank stare that was perfect for the character that he wanted to create for Myers. So now let's go to a happier place, and let's cut it loose and kick off your Sunday shoes. Footloose, my all-time favorite movie. It was released in 1984, and it's actually based on a true story. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and assume that most of you all have seen this movie, or at least heard about it. If you haven't seen the original one, there was a newer version with Juliana Hough in it. So I'm sure most of you all have seen that one if you haven't seen the original one. But some pretty cool facts about this one. The inspiration of the film came from a law that was put into effect in 1979 in Elmore City, Oklahoma. The law forbid public dancing. So the lead role of Wren was played by Kevin Bacon, and it was originally supposed to be played by Rob Lowe, but during the dance auditions he blew his knee out, so that knocked him out, and Kevin Bacon landed that role. Kevin Bacon also went undercover at actual high school as a student so that he could get in touch with his character, and he said that he only lasted a couple of hours because it reminded him too much of his high school days. And he also did not actually do the gymnastic stunts in the film, and he had a dance double. Interestingly, I found this out about Kevin Bacon. He is terrified of public speaking, and he would break out into hives when he would get nervous. So they actually had to give him half a Valium anytime he would shoot one of his scenes. I thought that was kind of interesting for our class. And then the other lead role went to Lori Singer, who played the rebellious teenager Ariel. Madonna actually auditioned for that role but was turned down for it. What made this movie such a huge success was actually the soundtrack, the musical soundtrack that was released about 3 days before the premiere. It earned over $80 million. So this film also went on to be a musical Broadway show from 1998 to 2000, and it earned 4 Tony Awards. This film was by far one of my favorites. Now that I have shared with you some of my most memorable movies from the 80s, it has brought back so many good memories for me, and I hope it has for you too. I hope you've enjoyed the information I have shared with you today.